record.
I think it would be best if we did like, we can try. I know like things don't always go, but like we could do one question.
Yeah. Girl, you know I'll talk over you any day.
I know.
Okay. Let us begin. And I'm happy that we actually got the introduction to Dr. Wooka. That helps us as well. Okay. I guess we're good. I think we're good. Are we good on?
Yeah.
Are we good? Are we good?
Yeah.
They're having a good old time in production.
I like your hair. I haven't seen it up before. I always see it down in like pictures and stuff.
You've been stalking her? Is that what you're saying? You've been stalking her?
Just a little, Steph. Just a little.
I call it support, not stuff. Yeah, you support her. We can start? Okay.
Support is good.
Awesome. So this is The Gist with Issa and Grace on Afro Vibes Radio. And today we have the beautiful,
the smart,
the talented,
the educated.
I can't do it. We have Dr. Wooka from University of Houston.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Wooka, how intelligent you are, how accomplished you are, that you're in the University of Houston. Just grace us with your presence.
Well, you know, first and foremost, I appreciate all of the energy that you bring. I absolutely do. But as you know, yes, I am a professor at the University of Houston. I've been at UH now for 8 years.
Wow.
Cougs.
Oh,
yes,
so you were there when we both attended. So you were there from 2012 to 2016.
I've been there since 2012. Yes. So when you were there, and it seems you didn't take my introduction to African American psychology course.
Well, you know, the thing is, I actually wanted to do that, but it wasn't a football game. I was in the honors college, and there's a lot of courses, and I was focused on chemical engineering, and that's just geology. So I'm so sorry. I should have. It was my mistake. It was our mistake.
I'm gonna come back because my mind was so many places. There was so many boys.
Are you gonna commit? So you're gonna go back?
Yes, my mind is straight. My mind is pure.
It's Saturday.
Intention.
It's a Sunday. Are you gonna lie on?
I can never lie on a Sunday. Where's my Bible?
Oh my gosh. Okay. No, you can't even say that word right here. But yeah, so keep going. So tell us a little bit more. So you were there for eight years. What have you been focused on?
Yeah, so, being that University of Houston is a research-intensive university, as you all know, my research is focused on African Americans and understanding mental health crisis and, sort of the risk and the protective factors because, folks are going through a lot of things now and for generations, but not everyone seems to be in crisis. And so trying to understand what that balance is. So I'm responsible for research, and as part of the research, I mentor doctoral students who are working on their PhDs in clinical psychology. I supervise clinical cases, so I'm licensed to practice, but I don't maintain a practice. Instead, I supervise doctoral students who are seeing patients for themselves because they're required to do that to get the degree. So research, teaching, and I just do a fair amount of service reviewing articles.
So
I stay pretty busy.
You're kind of like not in the forefront where you would be, you're not the student right now. You're not the person that you would be seeing patients. You're kind of like helping and facilitating others who are doing that and making sure that they stay on track, right?
Yes. And making sure that they're providing good evidence-based care for their patients. Yes.
Right.
I love that.
Wow.
And we're going to get into that. So evidence-based. I'm going to start off with there. So being a nurse, I look a lot at like hormones and like how that affects mental health. So for example, have you done any studies according to like the levels of like adrenaline or steroids in an African American body compared to other people?
Interesting question.
Yeah, I haven't. And, it's certainly an important area of research. Just when we think about our biochemistry and how it affects our minds and our moods, it's an important area. But no, that's not anything that I've looked at as of yet.
It's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, it's kind of a little different. But from my perspective, when I'm watching the news and we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about, this systemic racism and discrimination in this country. And you see this solidarity, with Black people across the world, even non-Black people coming to the cause, coming to aid the cause. How is that? Tell me mentally and psychologically, is that helping Black people, or is it still just an ongoing struggle through the protesting, through the rioting? Like, mentally, is this something good, or is this just as hard even 10 years back or even 3 months back?
Yeah, I think anytime that people can come together,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good
Solidarity.
thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, absolutely. You know, you feel like one, you're not in it by yourself.
There you go.
And, you know, one of the things that can affect our, you know, our mind and our emotions is when we feel like it's just me, or
Right.
I'm isolated in this and nobody
Right.
cares and nobody
Second guessing
understands.
yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you know, when we can get folks to all be on one accord, then, you know, that is
There you
psychologically
go.
pretty powerful.
And I guess with social media too, you know, being able to
100%.
see, you know,
The solidarity.
the solidarity, and even the ugliness with, you know, how George Floyd was treated, you know, that led to his
I couldn't
untimely
even watch
death.
it.
You know, I didn't watch the whole thing, to be honest. I tried, and when he was calling out for his mom, I just couldn't do it. You know, it's heartbreaking to see that. And, you know, mentally that it's in my mind. Like when I'm driving, I just think of it, you know, and it shocks me because it's a visual that not a lot of people have been able to say, okay, for 8 minutes straight, there is footage of what we are talking about. This is a symbol for, and then imagine all the people that you haven't seen, you know? So mentally, was that good for the nation to see this? For white people, for black, for everybody to see this footage? Or was it not?
You know, that's an interesting question. And I have not watched the video, so to be sure. And I actually do recommend, you know, specifically for Black folks, to avoid watching the video.
Right.
Because, you know, kind of like you were saying, yeah, you know, and kind of like Issa, you were saying, you know, this image pops into your mind. That's not good in and of itself. You know, this imagery that you can't avoid because now, you know, you've seen it.
Right.
And, you know, it's psychologically, it takes something out of you.
Right.
And so what I've been trying to talk to folks more about, and especially in the book, is trying to, you know, find the balance, you know, so bad things are going to happen that are out of our control. We want to avoid those things as much as possible, and then try and renew and re-up ourselves whenever we can, you know, like with a sense of community. But, you know, as far as the greater society being exposed to that, it seems like it's been a good thing because there are so many people outside of the community who just seemingly had no idea, you know, about the level of hate and vitriol and racism in our society. So that was good for that exposure. But I think for the rest of us who already knew, it's been, I think, it's taken something out of our soul, you know, our spirit, just to be exposed to that pain. And like you said, you know, him calling out for his deceased mother is like
emotionally exhausting.
You know, so I've heard enough about it. I feel like I've seen it.
Right. And
it.
Even like so how is it the psychology behind, or I guess the reaction when a Black man sees the video of George Floyd versus a Black man seeing the video of Amy Cooper? Is there any difference? Because when I was looking at Amy Cooper, it was less emotional to me because I know that this is not showing me that a guy is dying. This is showing me, yes, this is what we've been talking about. This is the systemic racism that white people claim they don't know about. And it made me not happy, because that's the wrong word, but it was like confirmation that white people know what we're talking about. And I was like, yes. But then when I saw George Floyd, it was more of a defeated emotion, very sad emotion. And so looking at those two videos, is there a difference psychologically when people, especially Black men, watch it? Or is it kind of just different in itself?
Yeah, I mean, it is different because, and I think you pointed this out, that this man was dying.
Right.
And, you know, there's something about being presented with your own mortality or that of someone who looks like you that is much more problematic than seeing someone being mistreated. But the interesting thing, you know, when we think about the impact of racism, you know, there's this language called microaggressions or racial microaggressions. And what are those? Those are the seemingly smaller, more subtle things that happen related to race. And so this woman, you know, calling the police saying, you know, I need help because of this dangerous man who we know wasn't dangerous, right? He was watching birds. I don't think you can get any less dangerous than someone watching birds.
He's just watching. That's crazy.
But the thing is, psychologically, when we're trying to figure out, wait, was that racist? Did they do that because of my race? Did they do that because I'm Black? That actually can take more out of us over time, because it just takes up brain and cognitive space
mhm.
trying to figure out, well, what was that? And did you
Right.
see that? And if it's just you, then it's over.
Right.
Fortunately for them, there was video, that
Right.
we all got to
Yes.
see it and to say
Thank
that was
God. Yeah.
inappropriate. Yeah, yeah.
And I was wondering, so how have Black people had to diminish their identity, diminish their
Mm.
emotional expression because of their skin color, because they have to compensate for the fact that they know that people are going to judge them,
Right.
because there is that stereotype of being the angry Black woman, being the angry Black man. How much have we had to compensate, if that makes any sense? So
Right.
for just like a clear example, so what happened with George Floyd, like he had to lay there for 8 minutes because he knew if he got up, he would get shot. Mind you, there's videos, many videos of white men being attacked by police like that. And they're like cursing at them, fighting at them. But we know we can't act like that, that we have to diminish ourselves. So is that a strength, or would you say, I mean, there's two sides to it. I'm not going to keep going in this question, but yeah.
I get you.
Well, I think, it takes something out of us, right? Like when you have to not be who you are and have this sort of hypervigilance about how you're carrying yourself and how other people are going to perceive you, and other folks are just kind of skipping along like life is grand. It takes something out of you, and I try and talk about that, so in the book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, I try to talk to or explain how over time, all of this stuff is like a weight, that we carry, trying to navigate being Black in a world that does not affirm who we are. Like that is
and
taxing.
thinks it's a conspiracy. That's another thing. Like it's not politics.
Right. And that was I've forgotten the NFL player Drew Brees, right? He was he came out and basically said, he doesn't understand why Colin Kaepernick and everyone is kneeling, basically. And then Trump has always been talking about associating that, hey, people are disparaging the flag. And it's like, it's not to do with the flag, it's to do with police brutality. I mean, Colin Kaepernick said this over and over and over and over again, but people just ignored him and just said, oh, you're disrespecting the flag, But one thing that he came out and said, and he addressed it to the president, and he was very much, his verbiage was very good because he explained like, hey, this is to do with police brutality. This is why they're doing this. Black Lives Matter is not disparaging that. No, like all lives do matter, but the issue, and a lot of people have been saying this, and I like how they've been saying, it's like, it's not that all lives don't matter, right? It's just that your life and your actions and what's caused onto you isn't because or related to the color of your skin, right? Whereas a Black man or a Black woman, they encounter certain situations purely because of the color of their skin. And so I really like, not just him, but a lot of people who have come out and who have recanted and apologized have sought information and education from maybe their Black counterparts and colleagues, maybe even their white counterparts or colleagues, but they're now understanding the issue finally, and I'm happy I'm not happy it took this long, but I'm happy at least we're making progress.
Yeah, because for me, I saw it, and I would like to see if you see this symbolism as well. I saw it as like an abusive relationship that African Americans had with the rest of the world. So we have that phase of the honeymoon phase, like this, like the Black Lives Matter movement, that was a honeymoon phase. This is a honeymoon phase. And then whenever another Black man dies and you see another video or story about it, that's the area of abuse. And so that's how the cycle that I saw. And the reason why I went out to protest was because I was like, I don't want to see this cycle anymore. This is treacherous, and we can't leave this relationship unless we leave this earth. And that's just how I see things.
It's crazy.
Well, it does seem, I wonder that we can invest more though in our own systems, right? And so starting with our educational system. So like Grace, you were asking earlier about, what it does to us when we have to adjust to this larger society. And I do think that if we could at least start to educate our children, educate the next generations differently, so that they're not being subjected to being invisible, being erased. I don't know if you all knew the story some years ago where textbooks here I think it was in the Houston metro area, where they described African or enslaved people as workers. And so, we have to be careful about the education that our children are being exposed to. And one of the ways that we can do that is like starting with having enough of our own educational system so that we can educate our people.
Right.
Amanda Seales was actually talking about that. I love her. She is a comedian, but she's
so
super
well spoken.
Yes, educated.
Well
She
spoken.
could snap on somebody, even when she was on the reel. That's why she did. Anyway,
she's not renewing her contract. She's like, it's over.
She's done.
We're done.
She's done. Period.
I didn't know she was off.
Yeah, that's the biggest news right now because she felt like the platform wasn't allowing her to express herself. And when Amanda Seales can't talk, she's gonna walk. She's gonna walk. Yes, absolutely. Like she was talking about with education, how other communities like they have after school program to like learn Mandarin or learn Chinese, and then like you have after school program where they learn like Islam and stuff like that, so that we need like so there's the said Pan-African Library here in Houston, so things like that can bridge the gap for the things that we didn't learn in school. So that was one solution that she brought.
That's true. Investing in organizations that offer subsequent education that is pointed and accurate to our lives and our culture would be good, because depending on the public system, I mean, hopefully eventually we'll get there, but we don't have time for that. And I think that one thing when grassroots organizations rally up and people are part of that, I think that's so powerful because it's organic in nature and it kind of pushes on the local and federal governments to like wake up and realize like, hey, there's all these people doing this.
Talking about the blackout too, I think that has the same type of effect, like saying this is how much we contribute. Right. And we can, and even though like things like just going to public school, riding the bus and then coming home and then you don't have to invest in the time and them taking them to an after school program is easier. It's something that we have to do in order to protect ourselves and for our kids and our grandkids and so on and so forth.
But I had a question, Dr. Wilkes. So in your book, or if you can just comment on this, from this, I'm really passionate about mental health. I'll say it again. I'll say it again. I love that you have a whole book on what it means, mental health in association with Black people. I love that.
Thank you.
Is there a difference with how Black younger people process this kind of information versus how older, more elderly, more mature people process that? And I just realized we got to take a quick break. So in a second, I would love you to answer that just so that we can, I'll restate the question and everything, but I would love to know that. Just give us a quick break. We'll be right back. This has been The Gist with Issa and Grace on Afro-Vibes Radio. We did that differently this time. This has been The Gist with Issa and Grace.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
On Afro-Vibes Radio, we have a beautiful queen, educated,
Dr. Rita Walker.
Why did you say her name?
I don't know.
Okay, so before the break, I had a question about do younger versus older Black people process the situation differently? What do you think? Is it the same or is it quite different?
You said just thinking about mental health?
Yes, for mental health on the Black Lives Matter agenda activism that's going on right now, and even generally.
Well, I think there's certainly a shared experience of racism, right? That there aren't any misunderstandings about the fact that racism is still here. Right. And I think that probably the older generations are grateful for the younger generations who are willing to get out there
and have that energy,
fight. Yes, and have the energy and the education and and the savviness, right? So social media is a thing, and so to have all of that, it isn't. Older folks are kind of like, I don't know nothing about.
Those Twitters.
What we're gonna TikTok about? What we're gonna do?
Right. And so I think, I think there is that sense of gratitude and recognition that, it's also sad, that racism is still here and it's as rampant, it seems, as it was in the 60s. Right. It's just seemingly less in your face. Right. But the fact that, folks are protesting similar things now than they were, in the 60s.
Right. 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Is the mentality still hasn't changed, the situation hasn't changed. It's just, thank God we have technology. So people in, Atlanta can see what's happening in Houston, people in New York can see what's happening in LA, and not just what is pushed by ABC and CBS, but really what's been pushed by you, by me. If I upload it and people, are following, they can see it. So it's great.
And then there's also that thing where back then in the 1960s, it was so, the racism was so blatant. It was, and now it's very hidden, systemic, implied, covert. And so
those are great words, Grace.
I mean, I actually did a spelling bee back
I
in,
do believe you went to UH at this point.
Spirit pterodactyl, I'm sorry to say. But not nowadays, it's like it's almost like, what is this? Reality, something reality.
Reality.
Virtual reality.
Oh, you were saying so I guess I helped you there. I helped you.
So it's almost like we're living in a virtual reality where it seems like racism isn't a thing, but then it's like, this is like a wake-up call. And I feel like it's like spring cleaning for the world. Like the world is just taking out all these little things that you wouldn't really notice, but it's just subliminal. Like, for example, in Pittsburgh, there's this slave mantle that's there, like in the middle of a park. And they finally took it down because of everything that's going on.
It's crazy.
And so it's just like small things. It's just like, we gotta clean this up.
Right. What do you think?
Small things that add up.
Right.
Microaggressions? No.
She's nodding. So yes, microaggression.
Oh man. Give me an A, Professor.
No, but what do you think as this pertains to COVID? We were supposed to be dealing with one pandemic, right? Which was to do with our health, and we were scared that could kill.
The fear.
And then we had that fear
eradicated.
And exactly.
In the streets.
And so now I don't even hear about COVID at this point, and we still don't have a vaccine. I mean, right now, you don't hear about it. Like you really don't hear about it. And so I'm confused just a bystander.
Lot of people thought
and I'm like, is this really a thing? Like,
I
mean, you have people protesting, and I love that, but I didn't hear anything about an outbreak of COVID, due to these protests. And that was the first. I was like, these people are gonna, come together with no masks. Some people have masks, are shouting, screaming. It's hot. It's humid. Like, isn't that going to be a great place for COVID right there? And I haven't heard anything.
And also a lot of health professionals condone doing protests.
Right. So what do you think about this?
Primarily in the realm of like that fear, because people were inside for months. And so I was thinking, like, what's going to get them out the house?
Right.
So how would you say that fear transformed through George Floyd?
Well, I think one of the reasons we are as informed and infuriated about George Floyd and his death is because most folks were at home. And so we've been exposed.
That's true.
And had more exposure because everybody was at the house.
We weren't at work. We weren't doing this. Everyone was at home, stuck in the house, watching the news.
Yeah.
Reflecting.
And so we had that much more, exactly. And so we had that much more exposure, do still have that much more exposure. I do think a lot of folks are still at home, which is one of the reasons I'm at home and not there with you all. Because I do think that, in a couple weeks, we're going to find out. I mean, they say that when there's a spike, it's more like a couple weeks after the incident. The rates are starting to go up, or actually they never went down. But the rates are seemingly going up in some places. Right. But I agree with you. I think the media has been pretty single-minded. And so in the background, people are likely being infected and there's not any real conversation about it. And I can't help but to wonder if because there's this perception that is, oh, it's Black folks who are dying, that we do see less seeming concern about COVID and protecting ourselves.
That's an interesting point. That makes total sense. That's an interesting point you got there.
Because usually whenever there's protests like this, there's also counter groups. Where the counter groups at? Where y'all at?
There was supposed to be some white supremacists joining one city, I forgot, but they didn't end up showing up. But I think it's for the most part, it's been Black people and supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement being out there. So, I mean, I would hope that they are reporting accurately, even if when it comes to primarily Black people being infected. But, I was surprised that for the last couple of months, the media, has been focused on COVID. I know I was wondering, like, isn't there any other news? Isn't there bills being passed? Isn't there, just other things happening? But I think
Well,
you're
I
right.
think the magnitude of the deaths, though, I mean, that there have been so many
And
people
that is
to
also
100,000.
true.
die. You know, I think at one point it was the leading cause of death in the United States. So, and because it, you know, and because it's hidden, right? So
Right.
there's the fear associated with it is unless someone is showing symptoms, you don't know. And
Yeah.
if you're around that person, you could be affected.
And they
So
said
when
that
I hear
people.
about
No, sorry. I heard that people actually are they're infected, but they don't even show symptoms. So,
Oh no, that's absolutely true. You can be
but yeah, sorry, I didn't want to.
without-
Yeah, asymptomatic, exactly. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
and then also more likely to infect someone else when they're asymptomatic.
Right.
So there are, you know, I've heard some pretty scary stories and know of folks who have had family members to die in other parts of the country from COVID-19. And so we've been extra careful, you know, with our family just because we know what it's like when we present to healthcare systems also. That's the other thing that we have to keep in mind, that one of the reasons we're adversely affected when it comes to health disparities is because of inherent and, you know, bias, racial bias in the systems and among providers.
Right.
So I do think that we have to be extra careful because we are responsible for ourselves.
Right.
And that's that's the approach I take in, you know, in the book. That is, we are responsible for our emotional and mental well-being.
Right.
We are responsible for our physical health. That at the point when, and our education,
Yeah.
you know, at the point when we're relying on other folks to take care of us, then I think we do kind of set ourselves up for a bit of failure.
And that's why I was talking about the strength too. Like, sadly to say, being a racist is not good for your mental health because it's a false identity, thinking that you're better than somebody else when you're not. So being able to bite your tongue, being able to be self-sufficient is a strength. I see.
Right.
So that's the silver lining I see. Everything going on.
But you've mentioned your book, so could you repeat the title one more time for our viewers?
Unapologetic.
The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health.
Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. And so, just if you can, just give us 1 or 2 points from your book that are very poignant that you would want our viewers to
I actually
get.
had a question from the book.
Oh, okay. Well,
so we
can find that out, and then we can go to your. Just kidding. Go ahead.
I was like, what happened? I don't know, man. I ain't got no coronavirus to tell you something.
Dang it, Grace, ask your question.
So in the book, you talked about the power of the Wakanda and the power of how Black Panther empowered the community. And we were talking about before this in our previous interview with Bree Renee, shout out, Kat.
I love her.
That we need to bridge the gap because I was very, very transparent in I wasn't raised, being African, I wasn't raised, even being African in America, I wasn't raised as an African American. I was raised as an African.
Just living in America.
As different cultures.
Yeah.
And so we talked about how, like, I need to bridge the gap by learning more about MLK, and then, like, for African Americans, bridging the gap about learning more about men like Shaka Zulu, like learning our heroes, learning our history, so we can have that power.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's solidarity. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that people of African descent who have been in the U.S. for generations have lost touch and lost that connection with a uncolonized African heritage and culture.
Right.
That people of African descent, we take our culture everywhere. Unfortunately for African Americans, there's just the sense of, for too many, well, I'm just American. You know, I've never been to Africa or any place on the African continent, and there's this disconnect. But the reality is that a lot of African American culture is African.
Yes.
It's very African, but we don't know because we don't necessarily understand what it means to be African. But our investment in a family and in strong sense of spirituality and, you know, deference to elders, you know, that's African, but we don't necessarily get that. And so I think that, you know, I don't know of a group of people who don't have a positive sense of their cultural identity who are able to advance in the world. Like, you can't, you know, put down your African culture and then be, you know, a fully healthy person based on what I've seen in the research and just anecdotally. So I do absolutely think that maybe first and foremost, but you talked about a bridge. And so I do believe that, when we can come together across the diaspora, wherever African people are, that when we can come together, then yeah, that unity will be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And do you foresee that happening now with social media and just people coming together and solidarity, like we've talked about, Africans like us trying to learn, or do you think it's still a ways away, or do you think that now with what's going on, it's going to happen more now?
I think that if there's an opportunity for it now, for sure, but it has to be intentional. And I think right now, folks are having these little pockets of conversations. People are having these little pockets of conversations here and there, and I don't think that there's a larger conversation happening.
This, right?
I definitely see it happening. I see the tension, and you all can say whether or not you experience this on UH campus, but I see the tension between, people, as an example, who are first generation or immigrants, from West Africa or even East Africa, who are immigrants, and then people who are African American, and that tension. And it's not just at UH, I assure you. It's any place where there is a critical mass. And it's sad. And I don't know if there's enough intentionality around addressing it, to be honest.
That's something. My dad has a ministry, and that's what he's really passionate about. Because I remember having a lot of debates at U of H, and people would talk about African Americans would ask people of first generation African descent, why do you think you're better than us? Because that's something that we're taught. And it's like we're bickering with each other while all these other races are watching, and we're not growing. And so that's something I'm super passionate about.
I think that, living here, I was born in England, but I'm Nigerian. I lived there for a bit as well. But coming to America, you had to educate yourself, understand, put yourself in those shoes, because as I was saying on our last interview, if I'm in a store, if my brother is in the store, and a white woman basically pulls an Amy Cooper, they don't care that he's African as opposed to African American. There's no distinguishing black versus, we're all black. And even though we have someone as African versus African American, I still think that there's still that needed solidarity and that hand washing the other hand to make sure that we're all treated in the way we should. And I really hope that does happen. And Africans understanding the historic nature of what's being happening in this country, where African Americans, or how they've been treated, where they're coming from, their opinions, their motivations, and then helping and putting yourself in that situation, because you're in America, whether you're like, I'm not in England, I'm not in Nigeria, I'm in America. What? Exactly. And so I feel like that's so important that Africans, just like anyone else, just like white people, just like understand the cause, educate yourself, make sure you know what's going on and why African Americans are feeling this way. And they know that it's your fight as well.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's crazy. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much. If you were here, we would have been attacking you and hugging you. I know.
You ain't going nowhere.
You can do virtual hugs.
Just like this. People on the radio cannot see us doing what we're doing. We are acting very strange. Hugging our laptop. But yeah, it was this, these are the reasons that we have a show like this, right? We have a platform to speak our minds, to bring, educators like yourself onto this platform to speak your mind as well, and come from a different, more formal perspective, and let us know what you're thinking, and then we expose our opinions, and this is what it's all about, So, and I love that you're Black and female. I love that you have a book about Black mental health. I will say it again and again. I love that, because that is my passion. I do software, but mental health as it pertains to Black people, right, and even just lower income communities that don't have access to therapists, understanding of mental health in general, and they're forced with that stigmatization of mental health. I love that you're breaking that. I love that you're pushing through with this book and just your career in general. I just thank you guys, because mental health is just as important as physical health, spiritual health, financial health, any kind of health, if not more. And so I just, from just all jokes aside, I really do appreciate what you do, especially it being in the Black community. I think it's much needed. I think people don't get enough of it, even right now, even if you're from the richer parts of town too. Just the
River
culture.
Oaks, isn't it?
Oh, Tanglewood. But it's not focused enough in the Black community, African or African American. And I just love that you're doing that. So if you can tell us one more time before we bid adieu
we have a little bit of time left. I would like for you to just give positivity, give solutions.
Let's have time for that.
And then you can give your Instagram
and book name again. Yes. So any positive words you have for us?
Closing words.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote the book because I know that there is strength and talent and brilliance in the Black community that I do believe is a bit untapped because we're so burdened by racism. But, when we pray and meditate and do all of the things that we do, because we know it's not Black girl magic or Black boy joy, it's what we have. It's just, it is who we are. And so when we can ignore the stuff, because we absolutely have to ignore the stuff sometimes because it's too much of it. Turn off the TV, turn off the social media, and just go away and be with our thoughts. Think about, you all have a wonderful platform here. That didn't come out of nowhere. It came from a space of saying, we need this, and we can do this, and we can put this together for the community. And there's so many people out there who have brilliant ideas and have talked themselves out of it. And I want for us to just kind of tap into, the special energy that we have as African people, as Black people, to tap into that and create what the world needs. Yes. I believe that's one reason we have coronavirus. So people can go sit down somewhere.
And think.
And do what we
and think.
And think and create. And even if we can't do it, then come up with a plan. Just what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? Who do I need to talk to? Just step by step, come up with a plan. And it's in every last one of us. That's why we're here. That is why we're each here. So but I wrote the book because I think that, we think about mental issues and crazy people, but no, if you need your mind to do anything, we need our minds. But because of racism, Black folks have had to navigate racism for far too long. And I think we need to realize the impact of that so that, we can get to the other side.
Right. Thank you so much. And tell us your book name and where we can find you on social media.
Yeah, the book is The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. It is on Amazon. It's sold out at Barnes & Noble. It was actually sold out at Amazon, but they got their shipments in. So Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, published by New Harbinger Press. So if someone wants to go directly to the publisher, they can do that. What else did you need?
Social media. Where can we find you and follow you?
Instagram, girl.
I am pretty active on Instagram. So just Dr. Rita Walker, and Rita is spelled a little differently. It's RHEED as in diamond A, Walker.
Because you are a diamond.
Yeah.
Precious. Oh, look at that smile.
Diamonds are girl best friend. Wow. And now we're best friends.
Oh,
y'all are beautiful.
You just leave her alone, Grace. Thank you so much. My Instagram is Life of Issa, so Life of YSAA.
And mine is Grace_Africa. Yes.
Thank you so much for tuning in to our show, The Gist with Issa and Grace on Afrovibes Radio. And thank you for being our guest, Dr. Nwuka.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.